Nope, next one. This one.
Ooh.
This is your
Okay, we're going to get started here.
Hello.
First of all, as I said, I'm a member of American Cinema Editors. American Cinema Editors was founded by the top of the top editors in Los Angeles in 1950 to promote the understanding, appreciation, and the prestige of editors who were always second-class citizens in Hollywood. And one of the things they did was they created an awards show, an awards event each year where they give out awards to the best editors in feature films and also in television. And the highest award that you can win from American Cinema Editors is the Lifetime Achievement Award. And in the 75-year history of the organization, there have been 6 New York-based editors who have won this award. We're extremely honored and extremely proud to have one of them here tonight, the editor of this masterpiece. Please welcome Craig McKay. Now, I'm just going to introduce the rest of the panel, and then I'm going to come and ask Craig a couple of questions, and then we'll go around the horn, if that's okay. Next to Craig is Tom Fleischman. Tom is a re-recording engineer, a mixer of feature films going back for as long as I can remember, for 50 plus years. And he does all of Martin Scorsese's films and Spike Lee's and Jonathan Demme's. And he is, if not one of the top, if not the very top re-recording mixer in the country. He did this film. You can tell from the sound in it how much of a player it is in the movie. So we're really happy to have Tom here. Next is Colleen Sharp, who is the first assistant editor on this film. I teased her before we started because I was a first assistant editor once, and I think she knows where the bodies are buried, so maybe she'll tell us something juicy, I don't know, we'll find out. On the other hand is Naomi Geraghty, who is, both of these people are extraordinarily successful and talented editors of their own, but they both worked for Craig. Naomi worked for him for several years, and part of, we're here to celebrate this movie, but also Craig. One of the things that he has done is to be a mentor and to move people, to give them a hand up. It's paying it forward is a wonderful thing, and Craig's been very good at that. So she's here, and on the end is Joe DeBeasi, who is he is a composer and a music editor who has worked with the music editor as a music editor with Craig and Jonathan Demme. And he is a very close friend of Craig's. He came all the way from Nashville to be here, so I'm very happy that he's here, and we're very happy for this distinguished panel. So here you go. I was going to start with a softball question for Craig, but I can't. After seeing that, I feel like I need a shower or something. The question I was going to ask him anyway is this. In cinema, there are these scenes, the chase and the French Connection, or the opening to All That Jazz, these 10, 15-minute scenes that you've seen that are just iconic, and you can't look away, and they take your breath away every time you see them. And we just saw one at the end of this movie. From the moment that Jodie Foster, Agent Starling, sees that it's a suit this guy has been making out of skin, to the end of the film is just riveting. And I want to ask Craig, I want to say, how'd you do that? But really, what was the process? I mean, how many iterations did you have before you arrived at that? Because it's perfect.
It was actually pretty close to the screenplay that was written. Matter of fact, we did deletions as opposed to adding anything. it was a very tight script. I'll tell you how I was visiting John at a mix, and he said, you know, I just got this book, and they're sending me the screenplay. And I said, well, I'd like to see it. And he said, yeah, okay. So a couple of days later, I got a script, and I read it, and I put it down, and I went, oh my God, I'm going to have to go through this emotionally, and which I did. And I went back to him, and he said, well, what do you think? And I said, I want to do this movie. And he goes, really? I go, yeah. Apparently he had a few rejections from that script. Yeah, I want to do it, and that was it. I got on it. It was very simple. I felt from the screenplay how powerful the movie was, and cutting it. I remember the emotionality and the twists and turns were something I always wanted to be able to edit. And I finally got the movie I wanted to edit. And it speaks to the audience. It's not like a performance piece for the audience. It takes you in really and grabs you by the gut. And I always wanted to do a film like that. And I got my opportunity. And there were several times during the film that I really had to take a break because it was too intense. But I knew from the second I started it, we had a very powerful film. And thankfully, we were able to do everything we wanted to do. We had very little difficulty, only one real problem. I had finished the first cut, and we're screening it, and feel the strength of it. And at some point, and this is the first cut, it's incredible film, but it's not working. What's going on? We didn't know what. John and I couldn't figure it out. And so we took it to a friend, William Goldman, the writer, and we had him take a look at it. And in the movie, there was a scene where she tries to bribe Lecter, and it doesn't work. And she gets called on the carpet for it, and she gets taken off the case. And Goldman looked at it and said, because the narrative force was so strong, and he said, don't let her get fired. Take the scene out. We took the scene out, and that's the movie you've seen tonight. But sometimes when you're in the trenches, you can't see it. You know, you're so involved with so many things, and that was the case. We were so involved. And but we made that one change, and that was it, after the first cut.
It seems to me, you know, you really do. Once you've got your foot on the throat of the audience, you do not let it off. This movie does do that, and I was pinned to my seat, even though I've been watching it recently. It's just incredible. But you don't, I mean, you talk about it as though it was natural, but really, it's a very specific film with a lot of really different styles to it, the close-ups and different things like that. And it had to be coming, it didn't come in, I assume it didn't shoot in order, correct?
Say what?
You weren't shooting it in order, so the scenes are coming to you in different, at different times. It's not shooting the first scene first, the second scene. You know, they never shoot movies that way.
No, no.
So when did you feel that it actually was going to work? Because I know you said the script was great, but that you felt that it was living up to its potential.
I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I'm just wondering if there was a specific scene that knocked you out and made you go, oh.
No, there was not. No, it was not. Listen, I had two absolutely fabulous actors. Act more than two.
Yeah.
And the story was really solid. I mean, I worked on a lot of films. You can tell a good story when you got one. I mean, it's not. Sometimes they creep up on you, though. But, I had all of that going for it, and so I always had that almost the moment I started the film. I felt as though I was working on a winner, really. But there was nothing that led me up to feel otherwise.
Some of the sounds and noises is jarring right from the very beginning. And was this something that was kind of like worked out with ahead of time? Is this something that was presented by a design?
From the beginning, Skip Levesey had designed these ambiances for the cell when she first goes down, and there were these kind of musical tones that run through that whole scene, and all the scenes that take place down in that cell. The sound is, it's got to seem natural, but it also has to give some kind of tension in those scenes. I want to talk a little bit about Craig because
Careful.
We're all going to cry.
I wouldn't be here without this man. My first feature mix was a film called Melvin and Howard, and Craig sat with me through the mix and guided me. I was totally green. I had no idea what I was doing, and he just coached me and held my hand and guided me through this thing, and it worked. When it came to Lambs, that was years later, and I had worked on Reds and a bunch of other films for Marty, and then I got a chance to work with Jonathan and Craig again on this film. My best memory of the sound mix on Silence of the Lambs was the problem that we had with the score at the end. When she comes into the house, he invites her in, and then there's that intercut with Crawford and the FBI guys raiding a different place, and the audience is confused about that. We don't know what. It was a brilliant way of putting that sequence together, but she gets in there and she's talking to him, and then she sees the moth, and the score has come sneaking in at that point. It actually starts on the outside, but it's playing through that whole sequence of the intercut. And at some point when she goes down the stairs, it stopped working. The score, was this heavy, ponderous. The theme was great in so many scenes, but in that sequence at the end, when she gets downstairs and goes through that door, and at that point it just kept going, and it blanketed that whole sequence when she's searching and the dog is barking and all that stuff is happening, and it didn't work. We had to find a way out of it. And of course, when it goes all the way through and then right up to the end. So, when he puts on the goggles and starts reaching out for her, that's where we brought it back in. But that sequence, it was death. That score just blanketed everything, and you didn't hear any of that great tonal stuff that Skip had done. And the moths flying and the refrigerator and the woman screaming and the dog barking, and all of that was kind of like back, and it had lost all the tension. So that was, I think, my favorite moment in the mix, was finding a way out of that score, and then we have the rock beat going in the background, in the distance.
That's amazing. It's great to hear that. It's wonderful to get these insights on a great film like this. Colleen, we had a brief conversation just to prepare for this earlier in the week. And as the first assistant editor, you see everything. You're the Jiminy Cricket for the editor. You're standing on their shoulder, telling them what they're doing wrong, but also, also seeing what they're doing. I'm sure that in most cases the editor really relies on the first assistant. They're the first person to say, hey, come here, look at this scene, see if it's working for you. But you mentioned something about Craig actually, probably not taking credit for it right now because he said the script was so great, but doing that the cross-cutting.
Yeah, Craig, you remember the scene with when the FBI that you mentioned, that the FBI is approaching the house and Jody's going to Buffalo Bills, and that in the script was supposed to be much more linear, and just they went to the house and crashed in and no one was there, and then she would ring the buzzer, and you created this tension that works so great with cross-cutting those moments that was not in the script, and I think it's kind of a brilliant moment.
No, it wasn't originally in the script.
Yeah.
Although it was always Jonathan's intention. I got the dailies in and I looked at them and they were shot in a linear fashion. No indication of cross-cutting, none of it. Guys come down the hill, the guy presses the button, it was all very linear shot. So I tried to call Jonathan on set, but he was really busy and I couldn't get to him. And so I cut it in a linear fashion. And then a couple of weeks later, we were screening everything, and that scene came up in a linear fashion, and Jonathan leaned over and said in my ear, how come you didn't cross-cut that?
Well, now we know. It's so spectacular. When the button is, it's one of the best misdirects in a movie that I've ever seen. Because you are fully expecting, them to come through the door and save her. It's a typical Hollywood kind of moment, and then you're like,
Actually, it's a very classical form.
Yeah. But it's a misdirect.
The part that always really got to me is when we did all the cross-cutting and zoom into, what does he say? It says Clarice. And the impact I wanted off of that was seeing her open the door.
Yeah.
Which is really the strongest impact of the thing. You go, holy Jesus.
Yeah.
And I worked toward all of that. The parallel cutting is actually, in its classical form, strict classical parallel cut.
Yeah.
But I knew that door open the audience would go, whoa. They had no idea she was at the house. And I end up being very proud of it because everybody talks to me about it.
It's not just that, Greg. It's every scene in this movie. The dialogue scenes, the close-ups, the conversations between them. You're on the edge of your seat, and they're simply talking. I would think, I know that you say it's a great script, but I know from my own experience that when I see a script that has that much dialogue in it, long pages of back and forth of dialogue, I think this could be a problem. It depends upon how the director's going to block it and how it's going to play.
It's okay.
Well, yeah, but it's also, I can't think of...
Yeah, it's a good point. No, it is.
I can't think of another movie that had such effective close-up work in it,
Well, close-ups is a very particular thing to me. I'm really the television kid. When growing up, we had the first TV in the town, and I stayed with it. I watched it all, and at that point, I wanted to be a cinematographer. At about 10 years old.
So you failed. You failed.
Yeah.
I'd like to bring Naomi here for a second because she is she did not work on this movie, but she was a longtime assistant of yours, and she represents, I think, one of the better characteristics of you, which is mentoring and helping people who you're working with get to that next level. You know, not everybody does that, and Naomi, could you just talk a bit about what it was like to work with Craig and maybe what he might have said about Silence of the Lambs when you were working with him?
Yeah, no, of course. Well, working with Craig, it was a true apprenticeship. Like Craig, it was like being in a master class all the time. And I had the great fortune to meet Craig just as Colleen was moving on to become an editor herself. And also, I think, Craig, just as you were making the transition from film to digital, I was an avid assistant when you met me, and then you got a call from Terry George in Ireland to go to Ireland, and so I ended up on my first project with you.
You just came to the country.
I had just come to the States 2 years previous. I was working in Jonathan Demme's company on a documentary about Mandela, and at a certain point, Jonathan got Craig to do a pass on that movie, and so I met you, and we were working together. And then one day, Craig came into the cutting room, and he was like, "How'd you like to go to Dublin on a movie?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" And I ended up going back to Dublin in total glory with this like famous American film editor. So that was it was a really fantastic experience. But one of the great things about working with Craig was that he had the power, I think, as a very prestigious editor of commanding a certain amount of people on his crew. And as the avid assistant, my job was to sit beside Craig as he was cutting and make notes and maybe do some sound work on the avid. But the first thing we would do is we would screen dailies, and I would take notes, and he would be like, "Well, what do you think of this performance?" And we would discuss performances, and it was such a great way to learn. And then as you started assembling the scenes, you talked about like just where's the dramatic tension in this scene, and we would talk about that, and you would find it and build it. And then I remember one of the great things that I learned from you was we were working on Copland, and I remember one day the dailies just kept coming in. There was 10,000 the first day, 15,000 feet the next day, and you were like, "Okay, we have a monster on our hands here." Most of you are in post, so you would know that, but maybe not everybody. When you're shooting, you shoot in setups, and it goes through the alphabet. It's like the first setup is A, and it goes all the way. And this scene that came in, it went through the alphabet like 2.5 times. So it was massive, and you were like, "Okay, this is a monster, but I am going to show you how to break this down," because you told me, like, as a young editor, one of the things that's most overwhelming is if you get a really big scene, you don't know where to start. But you were like, "Okay, we're gonna break this down, and you're gonna." And when I got my first scenes as a film editor, subsequently, I was like, "I feel battle ready. I feel battle tested for this," because I had learned so much from you.
I've got a story to tell
Go ahead.
about this guy.
Okay.
I kept my eye on him, and he's doing small mixes at the place we worked. And Jonathan came to me. We were going to do Melvin and Howard, but I don't want to leave the East Coast. And I said, "Okay, I'm cool with that." And then we tried to find a mixer, and we couldn't find a mixer. And so Jonathan, I was talking to Jonathan. I said, "I think we've got to make one."
You made a hell of a one. I'll tell you.
And if you were around Sound One and you were looking for a young, eager man or woman, but in this case it was just a man, and I knew he was doing scratch mixes, and I said, "Well, there's a young guy here who I think we should use." And Jonathan said, "Okay." It's Tom Fleischman. He, "What? Yeah, okay." And
I had mixed 2 documentaries at that point. That's it.
so he came in, and I knew he needed a lot of help and he asked for it. He asked for it. No, he did ask for it. But the thing is, he'd come in early in the beginning in the dub room, and he was a little tense, you know. And I looked at Jonathan, and I said, he says, yeah, I said, I'll take care of it. So the next morning when he came in, and I had set this up with Jonathan, Tom walked in, and we had hid behind the screen. Couldn't see us. And he's looking at the thing. All of a sudden, we started farting to loosen
This is
up.
taking a turn.
To loosen him up, and we'd be there, you know, a couple of minutes behind the screen farting, and he got with it. He got.
Well, how do you follow?
You're getting
up?
inside stuff here.
How do you follow up? How do you follow up
That's
that?
a true story.
But boy, you know, they are filming this. American Cinema Editors does put this up in the, so we'll have a farting section. But also, I'll say in this vein that of mentoring that I think, you know, for editors, especially of your knowledge and skill, to pass it on, I think is not just honorable. I think I would say to editors here in the room and who might ever watch this, it's a necessity. You really should do it. It's the right thing to do, not just to keep it to yourself, but to share, because it's been passed on to you, right? I mean, it's come. We've had our mentors,
yeah, absolutely,
and helpers too.
You know, there are 3 editors I just want to mention. You know, was Alan Heim, who gave me my first job on a feature as an assistant. Evan Lotman, who I was an assistant with, and Barry Malkin, who is also I was an assistant for. Those people freely passed it on, and I felt that, you know, it was a necessity. I didn't have anybody in the business,
Yeah.
and so they stepped up and they helped me, and I did the same.
That's great. Joe, I want to bring Joe DeBeasi in here too. Joe, you worked as a music editor with Craig and Jonathan Demme and this whole crew, Tom and everybody. So tell me about your experience with that. And I'm also curious just your take on Craig, because I listened to your podcast and you were talking about him being a musician and stuff. So why don't you talk about that and also what else you'd like to say?
Yeah, just also for clarification, I did not work with Jonathan, with Craig. I've worked with Craig on other films. But there's a few things I can definitely like to say. I want to add, like Tom, you know, my career has been helped tremendously by Craig. And not only that, he's helped me as a human being. Those of you who know me, I'm pretty open and there's a lot of fun and laughter, but Craig knew me when I wasn't that way. And there were many times when I would be like, I'd be sitting like this, my arms closed, and he would just gently reach up and open up my arms. And so he also, something that I carry with me is that he would say, come on in, let's look at this reel. And I would go in with my yellow pad because my memory is like that of a flea. And he would like, no, put the pad away. Just watch it and let it hit you. And that made a huge difference in my emotionality, connection, not only to myself, but to what it is that I'm viewing. And so, you know, Craig has passed on so many integral parts of our humanity. At least that's how I'm receiving it. And musically, I would say that because I'm a musician, I'm a composer, and I've studied music, and when I would do work with Craig, I'm like, I get music, and it's just like landing, like as if I'm magic. But it was his magic because his timing and pacing had this internal rhythm that not only just worked for the story, but musically, it was right there. And I remember saying to you, it's like, what's up with this? And he told me he's a musician, and he's got this heart rhythm that definitely plays through. And so that was a lot of fun for me to be able to play with that. But one of the other things that I'll say is, well, there are two things, sorry. As a picture editor, he taught me about the support of music and how music really needs to support what's happening on the screen. I know that for all of us here is like, well, yeah, of course. But there's like this fine line in terms of taste and what it is, like we all taste differently. But Craig really helped me understand the essence of the subtext and to help music stay out of the way so that the subtext would come through. And then the last thing I'll say is that working with Craig, you always felt safe. He was that kind of editor, that protected you and allowed you to be vulnerable yourself so that you could try stuff. And he would tell you, if it's, if it sucks, right? There's no question. But you got the freedom to try it. And that, to me, is what our creativity is all about, is to go into things and what if this and what if that. And Craig provides that. And because of that, that's the place of where I live now and pass on to as many people as I interact with. So, yeah.
So, I don't know exactly how we're doing on time. I'd love to get to some questions from the audience, but there's one question I want to ask Craig that I think is important. Again, for editors who might watch this. We all dream as an editor, as a young editor, well, we dream of winning an Academy Award and we rehearse our speeches, but we have another dream, and that is to meet a young director and go with him or her through the arc of their careers. And Alexander Payne has had Kevin Tent, they've done that. Martin Scorsese has had Thelma. And you went through Jonathan, you worked with a lot of other directors, but you went through Jonathan's major arc of accomplishment with him. And the question that I want to ask about this is, how difficult is it, because an editor is no good to their director unless they're honest with them. And how difficult was it for you to maintain that relationship through such intense work over such a long period of time?
I was always honest with every director I worked with. No bullshit.
Were there bumps in the road with Jonathan, or did you become real close friends?
No.
Would you
No,
call him a friend?
We were molto simpatico. Yeah. We were brothers. And, it's one of the big losses in my life. Mm-hmm. And our families hung up together, It was very personal experience. He very rarely came into the cutting room. He,
Or the mix.
or the mix, yeah, right? And so, once I knew I had his trust, that was all I needed, I picked up I saw the first Handle with Care, an early movie he did, and I could see in that this guy has a real touch with humanity. And as a matter of fact, he showed me the script when he wanted to hire me for Melvin Howard the first time. He showed me the script, and we were having lunch, and he said, so what'd you think of the script? I went, well, it's a little thin, And I said, but I like what you bring to it. I can see how you love the characters and how you love people. And I think that, that's something I want to be involved with. And I thought he was going to not hire me because I told him I didn't like the script, but he didn't. He hired me.
I'm sure he appreciated the honesty. Do we have time to ask a couple questions from the audience, or are we out? We do? Okay. All right.
Right up here.
Phil Shopper.
Hi, Philip Shopper here.
I
just,
know you.
huh? Yes, I know you. From Reds, yeah. When the dailies started coming in and you started seeing all of these close-ups, as I recall watching the film, I don't recall a conversation in the film that has over the shoulders until Buffalo Bill is dead.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering first of all, when you started seeing that, did you panic at all? Were you thinking, are there, where are the wide shots, where are the mediums, where's the over the shoulders, where are the,
No.
any of that?
Lambs was done later in our careers, and some of the early films, Something Wild and stuff like that, there are moments with he's using the chokers. And at that point, I was, well, how am I going to fit a choker in with an over the shoulder? You can't really, they did cut, but not well. And so I had some familiarity with that, and I know he believed in it. And back then he would have done every movie he did with those chokers. And I used to step on it. I used to say, you get too much. And finally, I think he got pissed off that I was putting him down from using him too much. But finally, he gave me a movie in which the whole damn movie is chokers.
And it really works.
And when I was young and watching television, let's go back to that. Television at that point everything was shot in close-up. You couldn't see wide shots on the TV screen. And so I would watch how they were cutting all of the singles very carefully. I studied it, as a matter of fact. And I always remembered that. And I sort of, some people did incredible jobs with it. And so I remember that love of singles. And so when this came in, these singles are so finely cut. Just absolutely to perfection for me. And I guess for everybody else, because it really worked. And so Silence of the Lambs was the last film I did, shot on film. I was avid before that and after, but then it just, as I said, didn't want to look at a TV monitor. But I felt I got to do everything, including these singles. And I did the singles, it's a large portion of the film, but they work. Everybody used to say when they'd seen them before, how are you going to make that work? How are you going to go from... Well, Jonathan, he heard a lot of that criticism, and he solved it by shooting everything in those singles. And and I had my dream philosophy in place when I was cutting this stuff. I said, you know how to make singles play. Only because since a kid, I've been watching it all, And so I'm really proud of the work on the singles in this movie. I'm proud of the movie, period. But the single work is really surprises me, how well it did. And it does something for the tension. What we haven't talked about in Lambs is the emotionality and how strong it is. And it comes and it goes, and it comes and it goes, but it's always very strong. The use of those extreme close-ups helps all of that happen. It punctuates it in a great way. And so I finally got to a place where I agreed with Jonathan, but it wasn't easy. Actually, no. They were in these cages all day. They weren't talking to each other even. And Jodie had to get used to it a little. But once it was explained to her, she's very bright. Those two actors are unbelievably talented. I mean, for an editor to be able to put his hands on that and bring them together and to respect it and to honor it, because it was so extraordinary. And the damn concerts really worked. They worked fabulously. You know, I'm putting it together. I'm going, oh yeah, you know, I like this. And
We have to wrap it up?
We're out
yeah,
of time.
okay.
Okay, we're out of time. I just want to say what an honor it was for me to be here. I've known Craig
Thank you.
since I met Craig when he was doing something called Free to Be You and Me in like 1973, and he's
Anybody
always been
remember
very
that?
kind to me, and to everybody in New York. Nobody's ever had a bad word to say about him. He's beloved, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.